Welcome, pro wrestling fans, and I apparently cannot unmute my mic today. Louise have some technical difficulties starting about 32 minutes late, so I apologize for about that. But welcome to a brand new episode of the History of Pro Wrestling. I am your host, Joe Monroe, and today we're going to talk about a territory that is actually near and dear to the Monroe family, and probably near and dear to everyone watching around the Mid South. That's right, we're going to talk about Mid South Wrestling. For those that don't know, this is a territory that was ran by Bill Watts. And we'll get more into that here in just a moment. But first, let's announce some friends here. First and foremost, I want to give a big shout out to Phenomenal Finds ATL. If you're looking for anything retro, check out phenomenalfindsatl.com. Whether if it's wrestling or sporting goods, you know what? Go check it out. They may have it. As well as Charms Photos. Crystal is a great lady and a great photographer. If you don't believe me, check out this photo of James Kendrick chopping the living crap out of Adrian Alexander. Adrian, again, sorry, you may sue me over this photo, but dadgum, this is a great photo. Uh, and as well as Les Murphy Painting. If you're having any trouble with any painting needs, contact Les Murphy at 734-334-3702. Big shout out to Red Ape Graphics by Crander Q. He is a good friend, and he does all of our graphics, including our little backdrop back there. And don't forget, folks, unfortunately, I have updates on Scarefest. I personally will not be going, but representative of the Eldridge and Monroe show, Alex Eldridge, will be there, and he will be representing the show, and he promises to get a lot of interviews and everything. But we want to give a big shout out to Scarefest. Everything is sold out. The weekend passes and everything are sold out, but they still have Friday passes, limited Saturday, and still have Sunday passes. So go check it out. Go check out Scarefest 16 if you're a horror fan or even a wrestling fan. I heard those two things cross over. Now, let's go ahead. Let's get back into the topic of tonight. We're going to talk about Mid South Wrestling. Now, my personal favorite memories of Mid South Wrestling is obviously Magnum TA and excuse me, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Hacksaw Butch Reed, Ted DiBiase, heck, the whole Rack Pack. Be completely honest with you, um, that I guess I'm going to get a little sentimental here. This territory was one of the territories that I grew up back watching tapes as a kid, where I stayed with my grandparents. This is one promotion that my grandfather did tape over, and we ended up watching a lot. I knew the name Cowboy Bill Watts from a very young age. Little did I know how Cowboy Bill Watts operated. I respected him even more. Some are saying, why would you respect someone like that? Well, that's Cowboy Bill Watts, and he did not care how to tell people how it is. But I digress. So, with that being said, let's get right into it. Now, Mid South Wrestling started out. Uh, I'm so sorry. Give me just a moment, folks. I apologize. Uh, Mid South Wrestling was not your average wrestling company. It brought a very different product to the sport of professional wrestling. Heck, eventually it would be rebranded as the UWF, and we'll talk about that on a later episode. But before it was Mid South Wrestling, it was actually NWA Tri State Wrestling, where former territory wrestler who was blinded in 1950 in a car accident, Leroy McGurk, I think I said that right, eventually took over promoting a wrestling circuit covering Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Until 1973, Cowboy Bill Watts had been one of the Tri State's most powerful wrestlers, ended up taking it over. And after leaving Tri States, Eddie Graham's Championship Wrestling for Florida, Watts returned to Tri-States in 1975. NWA Tri-States fought a 2-year promotional war against ICW in the International Championship Wrestling, which we've done an episode on that. If you haven't checked that out, go check it out right now. That included Outlaw promoting and filling an anti-shirt lawsuit against McGurk and Watts, which will eventually lead to the name change of Mid-South Wrestling in 1979. Now, one of Watts' first act as owners is to withdraw from the NWA, which honestly, back then, was very, very taboo. Why am I saying that? Because the NWA, okay, explain this. So, mob terms. You have a committee that has certain areas run by certain promoters, and and each promoter goes to this committee in agreement on basically who should be champion. That's how it was run back in the day. And some people are like, well, don't you think that's a little unfair? It kept stability within wrestling back then. But Bill Watts thought otherwise. And believe it or not, Mid South would remain loosely aligned with the NWA, continuing to have the NWA World Heavyweight Championship defended on Mid South Wrestling shows, which did spike live events as well as other promotions like World Class Championship Wrestling and Georgia Championship Wrestling, and of course Mid Atlantic Wrestling. But Mid Atlantic we'll get into a little later on as well. Um, but they would stay around the same territory as NWA Tri-State, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Now, during that time, we'll fast forward to the mid 80s, Mid South Wrestling began to expand nationally. And in 1985, had a long term wrestling fan, Ted Turner, even invited Watts to air Mid South Wrestling weekly TV show on Turner's Superstation TV network. See, a lot of people give Turner a bunch of crap, but he helped televise and nationalize professional wrestling. And Mid South is one of those prime examples. He wanted an alternative to the WWF show airing and commit for 2 hours with a Saturday evening time slot. So I'm probably bringing back some memories for some of the older viewers of the show. Everybody remember the Saturday mornings or Saturday evenings, turn on the TV, which consisted of getting up and actually turning on the TV. Children, yes, my grandparents had one of those, so I know how that is. Um, and turn it on. There's professional wrestling. I think you had a few channels, maybe up to 5, 10 if you're lucky. I could be wrong. My grandparents had 5, but I heard there was some that was made from 10. And wrestling would be one of those. And another one, Georgia Championship Wrestling. Again, we'll get into Georgia later. Uh, ended up getting acquired by Vince McMahon, which is known as Black Saturday. If you want us to cover Black Saturday on a possible roundtable, let me know. I think it would be an interesting subject. But then they would consistently run with TBS for a while, and the North Carolina until Jim Crockett Promotions bought out the time slot from McMahon, and as part of the plan, Mid South was kind of axed over that, and it just it wasn't a good ordeal. But this promotion right here I think is way overlooked. Why am I saying that? It's because of people like this. Bill Watts, for crying out loud. Bill Watts was one of the stables, and not the main stable for Mid South Wrestling, whether you agree with his antics or not. He was definitely a main stable. Magnum TA, a man who a lot of people would say would be one heck of a world's heavyweight champion, was part of Mid South Wrestling as well. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Everybody kind of forgets that Hacksaw Jim Duggan was part of Mid South. Heck, he had a rivalry against this man, Ted DiBiase. Yeah, the $1 Million Man himself was in Mid South Wrestling. And him and Hacksaw Jim Duggan slugged it out more than a time or two, even having a tuxedo match, which yeah, ended in very bloody. Other notable mentions, Jim Garvin, who would eventually become a Freebird and would be better known in his world class days. One Man Gang, right here. OMG. I just now noticed that. OMG. Wow. And Hacksaw Butch Reed holding the Mid South Heavyweight Championship, which is personally one of the better looking championships in pro wrestling history. That's just my opinion. But someone that 2 men right here I want to mention are closely associated with Mid South Wrestling, and that is Dr. Death Steve Williams, good old JR, and the Junkyard Dog. Now, I asked the question the other day. Do you think, or it's probably, yeah, it was the other day I asked, what's your thoughts on Junkyard Dog? Do you think he was underrated? A lot of people say yes, and a lot of people said no. Personally, I think his best work was in Mid South Wrestling. Though he wasn't the most athletic and wrestler, he got over so well with the fans. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. Hey, what's up, Bobby? How you doing, buddy? That's my little cousin for the viewers there. But everybody loved the Junkyard Dog. Like he was. How can I say this? Junkyard Dog was Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan was Hulk Hogan. That's the best way to put it, especially in the Mid South. And speaking of Mid South, most notable arena, the Mid South Coliseum. To go to that Coliseum, the rich history behind that Coliseum, whew, makes my heart flutter. The historic wrestling nerd in me flutter. But unfortunately, it didn't last long. Uh, and they ended up like every old building, tearing it down. Even though I wish they never have torn it down. Um, Now, during the territory days, Mid South Wrestling eventually added Arkansas to its circuit, and in 1982 they expanded into Oklahoma, which was close and personal to McGurk. And the Oklahoma-based promotion McGurk also formed an alliance with Houston promoter Paul Bosch to feature Mid South talent on the shows at the same Houston Coliseum, one of the most famous arenas in professional wrestling, apart from and other parts of the southeast eastern Texas, which Texas, I could probably do a whole 3 months just on the Texas territories because that right there, that's I call Texas a country of its own, and it definitely is when it comes to professional wrestling. And Mid South used Shreveport, Louisiana, as its base for its television tapings, which were first housed in the studios of KTBS TV until they were moved around until 1982 to Irish McNeil Sports for Boys Club, located at the Louisiana State Fairgrounds. Um, again, they had a lot of wrestlers, which I've notable here, kind of cartoonish, especially JYD. But something that felt so real to the fans is a story uh, that a lot of people, especially those who love professional wrestling and wrestling historians, the blinding of the Junkyard Dog, thanks to the Fabulous Freebirds. Now, the Fabulous Freebirds is probably one of the most underrated groups in professional wrestling. We will do an episode on the Freebirds, I promise, especially that's for my mama. My mom is a big Michael P.S. Hayes fan, and honestly, what woman during the 70s and 80s wasn't? I still don't see it. If you look at him now, you're probably thinking, what the heck? Sorry, Freebird. Didn't mean anything by that. But um, they were this rough, tough group consisted of Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts. Now, whenever they used to come to the ring, they would have the Freebird Cream, which was very, very high potent, let's just say. And during one of the matches, the Junkyard Dog was blinded by that said cream. Now that I'm thinking about it, this could turn into a bad joke really quick. So let's just refer to it as hair cream or hair gel. That's basically all it was. But JYD ended up getting blinded by it. And Bill Watts was so into kayfabe, which kayfabe, for all those people that don't know, is the basically blurred lines between reality and wrestling. And honestly, people still need to keep it up to this day because me personally, I think people are more invested in the sport when it is kayfabed. That's just me. And here I am exposing the business. Well, I guess Terry England's going to get me one of these days. Sorry, Terry. But during that feud, he stayed home. Like he acted like he was blind. So much so that a fan had wrote the name Freebirds on a bullet and threatened to shoot the Freebirds at a show in front of Junkyard Dog. And Junkyard Dog was like, okay, what do I do? Do I tackle this fan to protect these guys, or do I just keep up with kayfabe? Luckily, A security guard was able to catch him, and they were able to move on from it. But that's one of the most famous stories uh, out of Mid South. Not only that, just that blood feud between Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase. And not only that, Magnum freaking TA. I want to do an episode with Magnum T. Honestly, I'd like to interview him, but uh, Magnum TA is probably one of the biggest what ifs of professional wrestling. Because after Mid South, of course, he would move on to the Crockett Promotions, working with them for a little bit. Then he ended up getting into a car accident, which shortened his career. And it's man, the biggest what if. But during next to the UWF, now that's after it, quote, went national. And yeah, honestly, it really didn't last that long. I think it lasted less than a year. Uh, and they featured new wrestlers, mostly from World Class Championship Wrestling. And it just, it wasn't Mid South Wrestling, to be honest with you. It wasn't Mid South Wrestling. They missed so much. And between every territory, though there was golden years, eventually all good things must come to an end. And in 1986, unfortunately, that's what happened. They ended up closing up for good. Now, some notable storylines. Let's talk about the Battle of New Orleans. It was a long played brawl between Eddie Gilbert, Terry Taylor, Chris Adams, and, believe it or not, a man called Sting, which began in the ring and spilled out into the concession area, beer cans, chairs, tables, etc., uh, going all over the place. And anything the four wrestlers can get their hands on were used in the brawl, which nearly lasted 15 minutes. Sting and Gilbert fought outside the ring when Rick Steiner came in and power drove Shane Douglas. Where'd Shane Douglas come to play? I have no idea. Uh, I'm just going on with the story I have here in front of me, folks. And with Taylor on top of referee Randy Anderson, big shout out to Randy Anderson, overlooked referee. Uh, he made the pinfall. And later, Adams came out and told Anderson what happened, which prompted Gilbert and Taylor to gang up on Adams. Sting came in to even the sides, and it resulted in an all-out brawl outside the ring. Gilbert was the mastermind of this famous angle and received huge praise from the fellow promoters and wrestlers. Which, let me get on an Eddie Gilbert rant. Eddie Gilbert is one of the most overlooked professional wrestlers in the history of this sport. I am definitely doing an episode on him eventually because it's hot stuff, Eddie Gilbert. Come on now. Other famous angles is included Bill Watts being attacked and having the Soviet flag draped over him by, guess who? Eddie Gilbert, along with Missy Hyatt and John Tatum, after joining first forces with Gilbert. As Skandar Akbar, which again another overlooked manager, threw a fireball at Hacksaw Jim Duggan, blinding him temporarily, and the Freebirds breaking Steve Williams' arm. Williams was a recruit from the Oklahoma Sooners and future Dallas Cowboys head coach. We probably don't want to mention the Dallas Cowboys to him, though. Barry Switzer into training and getting back into the ring. It paid off in 1987 when Dr. Death defeated Big Bubba Rogers. If you don't know who Big Bubba Rogers is, kids, I don't have time to educate you that much tonight. Just Google it. And they ended up winning, the UWF heavyweight title. The Freebirds became faces around that time as they began to feud with Skandar Akbar's army as well as the Angel of Death. So these are just few examples of storylines within here. And not only that, they had phenomenal announcers, including Bill Watts and Boyd Price, with KTB STV staff announcer, if I mispronounce this, I'm sorry, Razor Bowden serving as ring announcer. Jim Ross would eventually join Mid South after closure with Lee Ward McGurk's Tri States promotion in Oklahoma and remained through its transition to UWF. Bill Watts' son Joel Watts would later be added to the Mid South slash UWF broadcasting team and work behind the scenes as a producer of the TV program. And following Jim Crockett's promotions purchases of the UWF for Mid South, both Bill and Joe Watts extended the promotion, and Jim Ross was joined by various partners, including Magnum TA, Michael P.S. Hayes, and Missy Hyatt. If you're starting to see a little bit of a trend here for your early WCW fans, this is exactly where majority of the roster and commentators came from. And veteran JCP announcer Bob Cadell became Ross's permanent partner near the closure of the UW of Mid South. Um, just a lot of people, a lot of people. I mentioned a few, but let me mention a few stables. I mean, we mentioned the fabulous Freebirds. Let's mention the Samoan Warriors, Alpha and Sika. Devastation Inc., which consisted of Skandar Akbar, the Samoan Warriors, One Man Gang, Killer Khan, uh, to name a few, Leroy Brown, Ted DiBiase, Kamala, the Missing Link, Bill Irwin. We mentioned the Rack Pack, which consisted of Ted DiBiase, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Matt Bourne. Uh, Ivan and Nikita Koloff, the Lightning Express, Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner. The Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. The Midnight Express, the original one with Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, and Jim Cornette. That's right, I'm a Jim Cornette guy. Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch even had it. Junkyard Dog and Mr. Olympia. Junkyard Dog Killer. Oh, I don't know if I could say that name. The Sheep Herders, which is Butch Miller. Jesus. Butch Miller and Luke Williams, which, if you recognize Butch and Luke, that is indeed the Bushwhackers. Terry Taylor, Chris Adams, the Blade Runners, Blade Runner Rock, and Blade Runner Flash, which was known as later become the Ultimate Warrior, and the man called Sting. Hot Stuff International, which again overlooked group, which consisted of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, Rick Steiner, Blade Runner Rock, and Blade Runner Sting. So there you go. There again, I can go on and on and on, but Mid South Wrestling was as important to the history of professional wrestling and to the stable which it is brought to today, just as Jim Crockett Promotion, or Mid and Late Championship Wrestling, the CWA or Memphis area, or Championship Wrestling for Florida, which we'll get to eventually, or World Class Championship Wrestling. Heck, even Stampede Wrestling. Personally, I think Mid South does get a little overlooked, but it's the legends that grew from there, like the Junkyard Dog, like Jim Ross. Heck, dare I say, Bill Watts made Mid South special. And to be honest with you, anything that special is only once in a lifetime. Now, do I think there's been kind of sort of duplicates of it? Sure, you get that. I mean, heck, you get that with any territory that ends up fading away. But you will never catch the glory of what Mid South was before it turned into the UWF. Just my personal opinion. Now, with that being said, I appreciate everybody watching this. I appreciate everyone that tuned in live. Those that are watching this later on, I'm sorry that we had to start late. Let's see. In my opinion, what was the best wrestling match of all time? For me, it's Stone Cold versus Rock. You know, Bobby, that's a topic for another time. But with that being said, folks, this is kind of short, much like how Mid South was. Uh, and that's all I got for the Mid South Wrestling. Now, a couple announcements I have. First and foremost, the people that won the trivia night, I will be shipping out your stuff on Monday. And with regarding to the Hall of Fame that I'm trying to start up for everybody, I'm going to be clear on this. This is not going to be the Joe Monroe Show presents or anything like that. No, 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 no. The Hall of Fame, and I have already chosen the class for this specific Hall of Fame. I've already called Nest and they've accepted. You all will get that as soon as I get a date because that's coming up soon. I promise you. But I am going to separate the Hall of Fame as its own entity because it's not fair for me to keep the Hall of Fame specifically for my show. No, no. Much like how I explained it to everyone that I've asked to be in this Hall of Fame, it's as simple as this. This Hall of Fame, and it is pending a name. I'm working on it. I don't want to try to steal anybody else's, Hall of Fame name, is going to be standalone by itself, just for the people that's going to be in it. And a lot of them have asked me, why would you even care doing it? Because it matters not only to them, not only to their fans, not only to me. What matters is their history and legacy. It's etched down somewhere. And that every person that goes into this will never be forgotten. There's even some people that I have asked. I am telling you right now, it is hard to find a match over. Heck, one of them, be completely honest with you, is probably one of the most underrated professional wrestlers that ever lived. But to be completely honest with you, all of them are. These folks deserve the recognition. No matter if they were wrestlers, no matter if they, made gear, no matter if they were even, podcasters or radio hosts for so many years. If they have helped in some way, shape, or form shape this sport of professional wrestling, they deserve the recognition that is due to them. They deserve their flowers. They deserve everything. And in my opinion, and if I have to be the guy that does it, that has to put his own money into it, then so be it. I am hell bent on making sure that the right people get their due and not be overlooked anymore. This Hall of Fame, it is going to be small. It may not even bleep on the radar nationally, but somewhere in these history books, they will be recognized. And that's always been a goal, is to preserve the history of the sport of professional wrestling. And yes, before you trolls even start, this is a sport. Now, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. For those that are watching later, which again, it is late, so you probably are watching this later. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for your lovely support. I know you guys are true wrestling fans. So before I leave off, I want to say keep supporting the crazy sport of professional wrestling. And if you're a troll, much like a certain diamond, for God's sakes, just shut up and enjoy professional wrestling. We don't need your negativity. We don't need, honestly, if we're going to be negative, we really don't need your 2 cents. So, with that being said, folks, stay safe, have a great night, and we will catch you next Friday. Take it easy.